Like just how disciplined he is about the small, tiny little tasks that he has to do every single day.
As I was like studying for it and preparing, I was working at Cold Stone Creamery, scooping ice cream.
So I know you're at 7,000 units right now. So maybe it's a little easy to slow down when you're at that pace or you're at that number.
There are people whose passion and joy is the thing that you hate to do.
Like we've offset some of these tasks, but the cash isn't quite there anymore.
Like homeless guy says, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king.
You got to leverage the equity that you have because your return on equity is getting smaller and smaller to trade up.
I didn't even know what house hacking was. Like that word wasn't even invented yet.
Welcome back to the Weekly Juice. As always, it's your boys, Ryan and Corey here with another episode for you. Today we had on
not just another episode,
monster, mammoth of a guest.
Yeah.
Probably the biggest dog of all dogs you could get on a podcast if you're talking about real estate investing.
For sure.
Super excited. It was a full circle moment for Corey and I, but we're excited to announce that today we are interviewing Brandon Turner, the former host of the BiggerPockets podcast. Brandon is a master real estate investor, best-selling author, business owner, and as I mentioned already, former host of the BiggerPockets podcast. Over the past decade, Brandon has established a strong track record investing in real estate all across the board, including both multifamily and mobile home parks. Today, his portfolio is comprised of over 7,000 units that generates roughly over $3 million per month.
Yeah, he said on the show today that he has 7,400 units. And I think he's doubled in the past year. We listened to a show of his, like, I guess it was a year ago, and he said he had 3,000 units.
It was February.
Yeah, not even a year ago.
Absolutely insane. He was at 3,000 units and 1.5 million per month.
The coolest part about Brandon is how open and honest he was about, like, he's like, I work like 5 to 6 hours a week now. Like, he's built a life that he is able to do whatever he wants, whenever he wants. And it's all about how we talked about systematizing his discipline. I kind of came up with this weird phrase, but like he even had a better catchphrase to it. Like how disciplined he is about the small, tiny little tasks that he has to do every single day. And I'm telling you, there will be nugget after nugget after nugget of information from this episode to take and apply into not only real estate, but business and life. Brandon's living the life and he's built the life. So I mean, full circle moment, like we said, for us.
He took bite-sized information out of all of our favorite books that we recommend to people and to read before they get into real estate investing and business and just put it into an episode for us. Like, I can't believe how much he just consolidated the information and made it so it was like digestible for Corey and I to understand, and also for everybody listening. So this is an episode you're not going to want to miss, but also you're not going to want to stop before the end. I know it's a little bit longer, but it's well worth it. And I don't know. You can listen to it whether you're driving, running, walking, anything. Like this is, you don't need really a pen and paper because it's a lot of like mindset stuff, but he's going to set you up for the long haul if you're interested in real estate investing or starting your own business.
Totally. It's really just like the entrepreneurial blueprint. Like that's how I would describe this episode, like how to scale a business to the point where he mentioned the higher he gets in his company, the less work that he has to do, the more responsibility, but the less work. And now he's at a point where he hires everything and he literally gets text messages when they close on deals. Like he's not even doing the work anymore because of the people that he's put in place, from the content he's created. I mean, we could go on and on for days about this, but I think we should just let him tell a story, get to know him a little more personally. And it was just an amazing episode.
Without further ado, let's welcome Brandon Turner. Well, Brandon, officially welcome to the Weekly Juice podcast. Corey and I are more than excited to have you on the show. I'll say you're quickly becoming the face or the godfather of real estate investing for our generation. So you're a mini celebrity here on the show. We are so excited to have you and we truly appreciate your time. So welcome and thank you.
Well, thank you, fellas. I am pumped to be here. I'm excited to chat with you, talk real estate, talk life, whatever you want to do. It'll be fun.
Love it. Let's do it. So if you could just give a brief background on yourself and then the story of how you got into real estate investing.
Sure, man. So grew up in Midwest family, Minnesota. And my dad was a meat cutter. My mom did like in-house daycare, basically. She worked at Dairy Queen for a while. So in other words, like very blue collar. I learned from my mom at a young age. She was like a garage sale mom. So we'd like go to garage sales every Saturday. She would load the minivan up with like stuff she would buy, and then she'd resell it like 2 weeks later at her own garage sale. And that's how she made extra money. And so I learned from her just that I guess that kind of entrepreneurial spirit, I think. My dad also had a bit of that. And I guess I went to college. I did high school, college, met my dream girl. It was actually the first girl I ever dated. I ended up marrying her, and we're still married today. And then I decided I needed to grow up after college. And I was like, well, I guess I got a history degree, so there's nothing you can do with that but be a librarian or a lawyer. So I decided to be a lawyer. So I started studying for the LSAT, the test to get into law school. And at that time, as I was studying for it and preparing, I was working at Cold Stone Creamery, scooping ice cream. And I bought a house because it was like 80 grand. It was cheaper than renting. It was a nasty little property. And I bought that. And this is '07, right? So if you had a pulse, they gave you a mortgage. So they gave me this mortgage on an $80,000 house. I fix it up. I get married. I sell the property just because my wife didn't want to live there. And when we got married, and I made like 25 grand. And I was like, well, shoot, this is way better money than I could make as a lawyer. Like for the amount of hours I put in, I'm like, this was way better. So I dropped all my law school plans. I told my parents I wasn't going to do it. I think they're still crying, and became a real estate investor instead. So that was my very first kind of entrance in, was just renting out bedrooms to some buddies and then selling the house after 9 months and made some money.
So you kind of fell into it by accident in a way.
Yeah. I really did.
Yeah. So, all right. So then the whole thing is like, then what? All right. So you did this one time. Yep. I guess you kind of got the bug, $25,000. Like, did you start flipping at that point? Like, was that your immediate goal? You're like, if I can get this influx of cash by flipping, is that the thing that kind of brought you to the next deal and the next one?
Yeah, I'll tell you a couple of things happened there around the same time. One, I decided, I wasn't going to do real estate. I wasn't going to do law school. I was going to do real estate. And then I had a buddy from high school, actually like the biggest bully in high school. This kid was just evil in middle school and high school. Now, years go by, we grow up a little bit, and he sends me out of the blue, sends me a message on Facebook. This is like a few years after Facebook had started. Sends me a message. Says, hey, Brandon, I saw you mentioned talking about real estate. Have you read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad? Because I mentioned I bought a house, and I'm like, I've never heard of it. And he's like, you got to check it out. So I was too poor to even buy a book. So I go to Barnes & Noble, and I just sit there in Barnes & Noble, read the whole entire book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. And then went and borrowed some other books from the library. I ended up reading 100 books that summer about real estate investing. Every single book that the library system had. This is while I'm fixing up the house. So during the day, I'd fix up the house. At night, I'm reading real estate books. And that's what really got me excited about just the idea of real estate. And so after I sold that house, I'm like, well, I'm homeless because I didn't have anywhere to live. I ended up living with my in-laws for a few weeks. And then I bought a duplex. And not that I didn't even know what house hacking was. That word wasn't even invented yet. But I just bought a duplex thinking, well, I can live in one unit, rent the other one out. And sure enough, I remember my tenant bringing me $650 in cash the first day, and my mortgage was going to be like $620. And I was like, shoot, I'm living for free. And so that's what really got me the bug about financial freedom. Because I remember thinking okay, if I move out, I'm going to rent my house out for $500 a month. That's profit. And then after that, what if I bought another unit and another one? And I was like, well, what would it really take me to retire? And I said, if I had 30 rental units and every rental unit gave me an actual profit of $100 a month, that would be $3,000 a month. That's all I need to survive. When you're 21, $3,000 a month is a lot of money. So that's what I did. I just got into the business. People collect stamps, people collect baseball cards and Pokemon cards. I collected units, just whatever I could do. I just started buying rental units, and I flipped a little bit, but this was 2008, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So it was a terrible time to flip houses. But I did a little flipping to make some money and really just started buying units. And when I was 27 years old, so 6 years after I started, I was able to quit my job and quote unquote retire. I had the kind of baseline financial freedom. I had 30 units and sat on the couch and watched TV for a while. It was great.
Yeah, we heard about this, that you got bored a couple months.
Yeah, you get bored.
That wasn't for you, right? I guess.
Yeah. Anybody, this is the truth about financial freedom, right? Anybody who is able to achieve financial independence at a young age cannot handle financial independence at a young age. You can't just sit around. If you're able to not work because you're that good and ambitious and hardworking to be able to get out of your job at a young age, you just can't turn that off. You find some other thing to do, which is really the key of financial freedom. We dangle this carrot of financial freedom to get people interested, but that's not actually the thing. What really I'm excited about is you dangle the carrot, but really what you're giving people is purpose. You're giving them passion. You're giving them a team. You're giving them excitement. You're giving them flexibility, and you're giving them unlimited growth. Right? The greatest thing about real estate is that there's no top of the mountain. You never reach the top of the mountain. No matter how good you do, you are never going to reach that top of that mountain. So there's always excitement and growth in real estate, and it's scalable. You can do 1 unit, you can do 1 million units. It's anything in between. That's why I love real estate.
I love that. And I have a personal question to go off of that, because obviously as you grew your portfolio, you were in the weeds for so long and you were doing all of the stuff that you eventually was able to scale and get out of doing. For us, we're in the weeds. That's where we are right now. And sometimes I feel like I can't slow down. What were you able to do that helped you? I know you're at 7,000 units right now, so maybe it's a little easy to slow down when you're at that pace or you're at that number. But what were you able to do mindset wise to get you to be like, oh, I can actually take the foot off the gas mentally? Because sometimes I worry, I'm like, dang, I'm going to keep going and going and going. And like, there is this like false summit that I'm never going to get to. Yeah. Like, where is financial freedom if you're consistently pushing yourself forward? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, what I've learned over the years is that like financial, like if you want to work less, the answer is not in doing less. The answer is getting bigger. And what I mean by that is if you're staying small, if you're like a small time landlord, you're buying little rental properties, changing toilets, fixing, like the hole in the wall that they punched because the guy was angry. Like if you're doing all of that, like you're working a lot of hours and you can't afford to build a team or hire people around you. So what I've learned is if you want to get smaller, you got to go bigger. And so that's like really what happened was the more units I got, eventually I could hire. Like the very first person I ever hired, the first like help I ever got, I asked my mother-in-law if she would answer phone calls. Because I was thinking, what's the thing I hate more than anything else in the entire world? Right? Like
I know what it is. And I hate it too.
Nazis and tenants, right? The two things. We can avoid those two things. Life is good. So I was like, I don't have a Nazi problem. So instead I had to tackle the tenant problem. So I said, mother-in-law, can you just answer all the phone calls? I'll pay you, that was like $200 or $300 a month. Just answer the phone calls. And then text me and ask me, if you can't answer the question yourself, like I can help you answer, but I don't want to talk to a tenant anymore. And the freedom I experienced from that small change, like affected the rest of my life. Like all of a sudden I realized like, well, shoot, like one, she was so much better at it than me. Like and she loved it. She it's her joy, like her like Zen moment when she has to get on the phone with a tenant and talk them off the ledge of not paying rent, right? Like that's her passion. And that's weird. I don't get it. I don't like that at all. I don't even want to touch a phone. I'm a millennial. You're millennials, right? Like we don't like the phone. So like what that taught me is like, there are people whose passion and joy is the thing that you hate to do. And so they will do it 10 times better for like forever because they like doing that thing. And all of a sudden, because I was not doing that thing that drained me, that felt heavy. I love that phrase, heavy. It felt heavy to talk to a tenant on the phone. I could work on the things that felt light. And allowed me to scale my business more rapidly. Like things I felt light, finding deals. I like that. That's fun. Like doing the funnels and sending out mail and all that stuff. That's fun. And so now I could focus on that stuff. So I was able to get less involved by going bigger. Now I still took a long time to get there. I took, 10 years to really get to that point. But there's no reason a person has to. Like you could literally just start with the end in mind and say, okay, well, what would it take to have 5 people in my company running everything? Well, we'd have to do 10 flips a year. Well, if you had 5 amazing people, could they do 10 flips a year? Probably. Oh, so in other words, you could just start that way right now. Yeah.
So to that point of the light and heavy. So for us, we still have full-time jobs and managing our portfolio, even though it's small, there's a lot of different tasks. And we're like, listen, like we can't be doing this every day. Yeah. So we recently outsourced and hired a property manager, but we're currently finding that it feels like they're overcharging for every single thing that has to be done. And they don't care as much as we care about our property and trying to not penny pinch, but get the best deal possible for the fix or the repair. And the cash flow that we once saw is no longer there. It kind of feels like it's just the loan paid on and the tax benefits at this point, but we're trying to scale, right? So we're like, all right, if we can get our time back, then this can help us scale. Do you have any thoughts or like advice for guys and gals in a similar boat? Is like, hey, listen, like we've offset some of these tasks, but the cash isn't quite there anymore.
Correct. So a couple of thoughts on that. One, what I did at the beginning, when I started investing in real estate, I assumed I would manage myself. And therefore, when I ran the numbers on my properties, I ran the numbers as if I was managing myself, which means I didn't include those upcharges on the plumbing. I didn't include the cost of management itself. I didn't include the extra vacancy because they don't care to fill your unit. In other words, I looked at it through my lens and I ran the numbers. Then as soon as I gave it over to property management, exactly the same thing happened. All of a sudden my cash flow disappeared, right? So the first tip, obviously, for people listening to this is if you plan to ever get out of managing your own property, start with that when you analyze your deal at the beginning. It's going to make it harder to find deals. That's for sure. But start that way. The second thought, though, and it's kind of exactly the opposite of what I just said, is it doesn't really matter in the beginning anyway if you're making cash flow. Now, this sounds crazy, right? But the point of the first few deals is not to make money. The point of the first few deals is to gain confidence, to gain knowledge, to gain connections, to build your track record. Like 20 years down the road, like who cares if that first property made you $100 in cash flow or $0 in cash flow? It's irrelevant. What matters is the experience that you got during that time. And so in one regard, it doesn't really matter. Get the property, just get it going. Don't lose money, but you don't need to make a lot of money in the beginning. You just got to build the reputation and the knowledge and all that. But also start analyzing for the deals. And then the third thing I'll add for you guys specifically is you are influencers. I know I hate that term. I'm sure you do too. But you influence a lot of people through your podcast. There are people out there. So there's a great quote. Let me backtrack. There's a great quote from the movie Minority Report that says, it's that Tom Cruise movie, but this like homeless guy says, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And I love that phrase because it's like, look, like you guys are rock stars. If you've done one real estate deal, you are a king to all the people who have never done anything and that want to. And how many people in America right now want to do real estate and would love the idea of it, but they haven't done any? Millions.
A lot of people.
Millions, yeah. Right? So in other words, you can bring people into your world, like whether it's an internship, whether it's a JV stuff, whether it's whatever. I mean, almost all of Open Door Capital was built with interns, like from the beginning. Is it interns or JVs? Like I didn't pay salaries in the beginning to almost anybody, really nobody in the beginning. It was just like people who wanted to be around me because they knew they could learn from me. So I would encourage people, like if you have any kind of audience, or even if you don't have an audience, even if you just have experience in any way, you can find people around you who are young. They're usually hustlers, are really good at this stuff. You filter through, you find a great one, put them on the management. They're going to be way cheaper than a property manager, and they're going to care because they want to impress you and they want to learn, and you can guide them. You can mentor them into helping you and helping others. In fact, that entire time I was building my portfolio, I managed a portfolio for my mentor. I took over all his management and I did an incredible job. I mean, I could pat myself on the back. Never had vacancy over there. I increased his rents all the time. Like I was on top of things. I also did the maintenance for him. I did everything because he was where I wanted to be. And to this day, I don't regret a minute of the time I spent under houses, changing toilets, all that, because I learned from this guy and that was the value I could bring to him. And if you can get that from other people, and if you're listening to this, if you can bring these guys value, that's how you do it. That's what I'd recommend.
I think that's a great point. And we actually just got to a point where we're literally having a meeting tomorrow about how to partner with someone specifically who has a property management team, who is finding deals, and they're hopefully going to be using us as the network, like to help source money. So it's great that you mentioned that because we really are right at that point. And it's exciting. But what I wanted to mention here and ask you is, when we first got into real estate, I learned from a guy named Chad Carson, Coach Carson. I'm sure you've heard of him or know who he is. I love He's
Chad.
great.
We ran into each other at Disney World randomly. Like we just like randomly ran into each other at Disney World. It was great.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I think he's in Spain for like indefinitely or something.
Yeah,
now I saw that.
Yeah.
But he's the man. And I resonated with him because I'm a coach and he is too. But the one of the things that I was thinking is like, okay, I just got to keep stacking these rentals. I got to stack. I got to get to 20, 30, 40, 50. And then as I talk to people nowadays, they're like, dude, no, you got to leverage the equity that you have because your return on equity is getting smaller and smaller to trade up. Okay. So let's speak to the people that are like, okay, I have 8, 10, 12 units. I want to keep stacking these things at $200, $300, $400, $500 a month. At what point did you decide to take your whatever portfolio size it was, take 3 or 4, sell them off and try to trade up? Because we're at a point where I have some equity. I just don't know when the right time is to go do that.
Yeah, great question. So let me first case it in a different way of thinking about this that I learned from this book called Lifeonaire. It's Lifeonaire. This book right here, it's called Lifeonaire.
Oh yeah, I've heard you talk about it.
Yeah, but here's what they make this point. This is the main point of the book right here. Is if the goal of a game, like the goal of the game determines how you play the game. So if the goal of Monopoly is to get all the money and all the property or whatever, then you're going to play a different way. If the goal of Monopoly was instead to go around the board as many times as possible, and the winner is who goes around the board the fastest, let's say you play a different way, right? Like you play the game based on the goal. If the goal of life is to make as much money as possible, there are certain rules we should play by. Like you should always take your equity and immediately like get the highest return at every possible second forever, right? That makes sense as a rule if the goal of life is to make as much money as possible. If the goal is something else, though, then the rules have to change. And so that's what that book is really about, why I liked it so much. So I just like to say that like there is no right or wrong here. It's like what makes your life amazing. Like if you hate your job and you want out of a job and your goal is to get financial freedom, then yes, you will want to play by certain rules to maximize your return so you can get that cash flow. But you're also going to probably need the cash flow, not the appreciation. So you're going to, again, the rules are dictated by the goal of the game. So if you have a lot of equity in your property, like you mentioned that phrase, return on equity. So return on equity is this like not very well understood, not very often talked about concept, but it's super important for people today if they're trying to maximize return. It basically says, look, how much money does your property, would you actually walk with if you were to sell your property today? How much would you get after realtor fees and all that? What's the check size you would get from the title company? And then how much money did you make each year in profit? Like last year, the year before, an actual profit. I'm not talking about just like mortgage minus, rent or rent minus mortgage, but like after you assume all the costs and replacing the water filters and the water heaters and the roof and all that, what's your actual profit? Now take the amount of profit you make in a given year, divide that by how much of that equity the amount you would get from the title company if you sold, and that is your return on equity. The reason it's so valuable is because you could sell and put that money into something else. So a few years ago, I sat down, this is about 3 years ago, maybe 3.5 years ago, I sat down and I did that. I put all of my properties, the value, what I would walk with, my equity, how much profit I made the prior year, and I ran my return on equity calculation. And my return on equity across the board was 1.5%. That was my average. I was making on my money was 1.5%. I was like, shoot, that is terrible, right? Like I was thinking I was getting like a 10, 15% return on my money, but no, because the equity went up so high, my actual return on equity is terrible. So then I took that money and I actually sold almost all my properties that were like that. I still have a few, and I dumped it all into open door, mostly into open door capital stuff, my own company. As an LP. So I'm a GP of the company. I'm like a founder and I run the thing, but I'm also an LP. So I dump my money in there. Why? Because we're projecting somewhere in the 15% per year return range. Like our average return each year is projected to be like 15 to 20%. So I went from, and even my cash flow, we're averaging right around like over the life of the thing, our cash flow somewhere in the 8 to 9% range. So I went from 1.5%, 2% to like 8, 9% average. That's a dramatic increase. Like that's a 4x increase in my cash flow. That just by doing that calculation. And what also happened is I went from having to deal with all this drama of dealing with tenants and problems in a small area that I wasn't going to appreciate very much. And now I don't have to do anything. I'm an LP in this deal. And so my workload went down dramatically. My cash flow went up. My potential future growth went way up because now I'm investing in places like Austin, Dallas, Daytona, Atlanta that are appreciation focused, but also have cash flow. So it's like win, 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 right? I was talking to this investor one time. He told me, yeah, my goal is to retire in the next 5 years. And so I sat down with him and I looked at all his properties. We sat down and did all this stuff. It was for a charity thing he bid on. And so I did like an hour coaching call with him. And I sat there and he basically had to make an extra $5,000 a month to be able to retire. So we ran these exact calculations, this return on equity, and he was averaging 2.5%. And I was like, dude, if you just take these properties,
put that into open door capital.
Put that into my company or any good syndicator that you trust. But obviously I like mine, but like put it in there. I was like, you can retire tomorrow. I think he almost started crying on that call. He didn't realize how close he was to freedom because he had so much equity, and people don't think about return on equity. So if you can run that return on equity calculation on all your properties, decide, is this the highest and best use for my money right now? And you might be shocked to see how much more you could make and how much less you could work by reallocating that money elsewhere.
We just texted my realtor to put my little duplex on the market, and it's funny because we're starting to get into some syndications and we're looking at, 12, 13% returns projected. Yeah. And I'm like, if I do the cash flow number of the last 3 years, I've had one specific property. Everyone has one, right? If I look at the cash flow numbers, it's like, I got like a $1,200 spread between the mortgage and the rent, which is great. I'm probably ended up being like $200 just based on not knowing anything, not knowing that I needed to fix shit. Like, it's just all that. So it's like, it's very, it's the return on equity has something that I just recently really learned about, and I'm excited to explore that. But that's the power of holding on to real estate for a longer period of time, right? I mean,
yeah, it does. It goes up. And then again, there's nothing wrong with having a lower return on equity. If you like the security, if you like having properties you understand, if you like again, if that's your goal, then you shouldn't. You should pay off your properties over time, get a terrible return. In fact, I was talking with an investor recently who was one of the biggest syndicators in the country. And he was like, yeah, I don't sell. He's like, I raise money from investors and I don't sell. And I said, yeah, but then if you never sell your properties, every year you're what's called the IRR, you're like average return or whatever. Basically, it's a terrible explanation, but your IRR drops every year. The return investors are getting is dropping over time. And he's like, yeah, I don't care. Like my people don't care. The only people that care about IRRs are syndicators. What do people actually want? They want freedom. And so if I can hold on these properties for a long time and like forever, eventually the loan gets paid off or we refinance, they get their money back and it just flows. They get freedom. And I'm like, it changed my entire perspective. I'm going to totally launch a forever fund soon. That's like, no, we don't sell ever. Yeah, you're not getting the best return ever, but guess what? You don't have to do anything ever again. You put your money in, it sits there for the next 50 years. And every year your cash flow goes up because rents go up. I'm like, shoot.
That's the way.
The goal of life.
That's one of the good ways. One of the ways. Yeah.
And it's one strategy. There's a million things. And I love the fact that you brought up that idea of like where the spread between rent and mortgage is like 1,200, but you're actually profiting less. So in one of my books, let me grab it here. Where is it? This one right here. So you don't have to even buy the book. I'll tell you the whole concept right here. The Multifamily Millionaire. In this, the concept is buy multifamily. But I spend a whole bunch of time harping on this concept that I call pure cash flow. It's a new metric that I made up because so many people get confused on cash flow. They think a property cash flows because the rent is $1,000 and the mortgage is $800. They're like, oh, it cash flows $200 a month. No, pure cash flow is like, like when you put gold into you put something away, metal into a fire, you purify the gold. When you purify gold, it means you're like putting gold into really, 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 really hot. And it melts away all like the iron and copper or whatever it might be in there. And all you're left with is pure gold. Same concept with cash flow. When you put it through the fire, when you stress test it, going, hey, we got to put a new roof on every 20 years. It's $20,000. That's $1,000 a year that your roof is costing you. And that is then what, $88 a month or whatever.
Yep.
So you should account for $88 a month. That's part of your pure cash flow. It's the capital expenditures or CapEx, repairs, vacancy. Those are all, they come out as well. And the number that you're left with, and again, you have to kind of make some assumptions because it's averages. But when you're all said and done, the number you're left with, that's your pure cash flow. And that's what I encourage new investors to really learn how to run the numbers and get pure cash flow. In fact, it's everything.
And it's hard to determine that, right? I mean, we run the numbers based on the information that I got from reading your, one of your first books. And, you're never spot on, right? You're never exactly right. But it's funny, we just had a turnover at a property. And I think I did the numbers. It cost us like in totality with the rent that we lost in June. And then the rent that went to the property manager in July, probably like $9,000, like literally. Yeah. And I'm like, dang, that's like actually our cash flow for the whole year. Now, that being said, we've paid our loan down. We owe 100 and something. It's worth 240 something, so all of those things add up and it's all good, but it's the pure cash flow is so much harder to find. And I'm glad that you brought that up.
It is. David Green, host of the BiggerPockets podcast now. David has this great quote. He says that cash flow is a defensive metric. In other words, it's not designed to make you money or even financial freedom. The only purpose of cash flow is to make sure you can hold on to the property long enough to make you wealthy. Because the wealth is built, like you said, the loan gets paid down, the property goes up in value. That spread is designed, like that's what really helps you. Now, if you can get pure cash flow, great, you should. That's what gives you freedom. But the goal of real estate, really, the way you make most of the money is by that spread between what it's worth and what you owe on it and the tax benefits you get. When you combine all four of those things together, that's what makes real estate amazing.
Nice little bow on top. That was amazing.
Yeah.
Can you talk to, I don't want to skip this part of the story. I'm bringing us back to age 27, retired on the couch, right? How did you originally get involved in BiggerPockets? Where does that fall into your story? And then I just, I know you're your own man now, but I do want to talk about that because that you were the face for so long.
It started with a misdemeanor. Let me tell you, I don't know if I've actually publicly said this on a podcast, but I'm going to say it now and let the government come crack down on me. No,
Love it.
Remember like that, like all those like file sharing sites back in the day? It was like Kazaa and like LimeWire and Napster and all that. All right. So here I am, like 27. I just bought a brand new, with a used one for $300, but my first like Apple computer, like a laptop. And like, I was not a computer guy. Like I'm figuring it out. And I'm like, I download like LimeWire, I think it was. And I'm like looking, I typed in like make money into like LimeWire. Cause I'm like making $3,000 a month in cash flow.
That's better than what a lot of people type in LimeWire, dude.
Okay. It is much better. It is much better than what other people type in. But I'm like, make money strategies, whatever. And I download a couple ebooks that were on there. Probably a lot of viruses that came with it, I'm sure. But I downloaded this ebook that was, I don't remember who it was by. What was the name? Viper Chill was the guy's name. I don't even know if he's still around anymore. He's an internet marketing guy, taught internet marketing, but a guy named Viper Chill. That led me to a guy named Pat Flynn with a podcast called Smart Passive Income. It's still around today. So I used that, downloaded all these books, including the 4-Hour Work Week. So sorry, Tim Ferriss, I downloaded your book illegally in the beginning, but I have bought multiple copies now. I buy it for people all the time. But so I download these books, I read them on like making money, because again, I'm making like $3,000. It's enough to like survive, pay my bills, so I can, tinker. But like, I didn't want to just do that forever, right? I wanted a better life. So I started reading these books. I get really excited about internet marketing. Like, I'm just like, this is so cool. Like, you can build a website and make money. And like, I would that feeling when you get so excited about something, you wake up like 3 a.m. just for the heck of it, because you want to get started on that.
Yes, happens 3 times a week.
Literally every week.
That's how you know you're doing what you were like put on this earth to do, right? Or at least in that moment, that's what you're meant to do. And I found that with internet marketing. I'm like, this is amazing. Every day I was just hundreds of books and podcasts and everything. It was great. So in there, I started a blog. My idea was I'm going to make a blog called realestateinyour20s.com. And I took realestateinyour20s.com and I grew it for about a year. And I just wrote blog posts about how to invest in real estate. But back then, to grow your own blog, the way to grow it is to go and guest post on somebody else's bigger blog. Well, the biggest blog in the real estate space was, of course, BiggerPockets. So I reached out to Josh Dorkin, who was by himself at the time. He was no employees, it was just Josh in his basement working on BiggerPockets. And I said, hey, can I guest post for you? And he ignored me. And then like 4 months later, he claims he never saw the email. Like 4 months later, he actually hit me up. He found my blog and was like, hey, do you want to write for my site? And I'm like, yeah, I asked you like 4 months earlier. So anyway, so I finally get to write for Josh. And that makes us Facebook friends. We end up becoming Facebook friends. A few months later, he writes.
That's a big deal.
It is a big deal, right? I got a big deal. Facebook friends with Josh Dorkin. And I remember the first time, like I actually had a phone call with Josh, because I was going to, guest post on his site. He wanted to talk on the phone. I was freaking out. I'm like, this is Josh, the godfather of real estate Dorkin. Like, he built BiggerPockets by himself.
Dude, you want to see how much I'm sweating right now talking to you? That's this moment right now talking to you.
Oh, man. No, man. So I'm talking to Josh Dorkin. Yeah, I'm like freaking out because Josh Dorkin, I got to talk to him on the phone. And I'm in like my apartment complex. I was like fixing a toilet and I'm like talking to Josh. Like, I don't know. It was surreal. So that leads to Josh and I becoming Facebook friends. He says, hey, I'm looking for help editing blog posts. Anybody have some free time that wants to edit blog posts? And I'm like, I can edit blog posts. Complete lie. I could not. I can't even spell. But I end up editing blog posts for him. And then we find out very quickly I'm terrible at it. So he moves me to some other role and I start helping out in some other area. And then I'm bad at that. And then I'm like, hey, let's start a podcast. And that ended up being the thing. It ended up being good at podcasting, apparently. And here we are.
Okay.
That's amazing.
Later. There's a long story, but yeah.
Can you also talk about like from there, right? You obviously it kickstarted something. You guys are cranking from there. How did you start the iteration of your books from there? You know, I can tell you're well thought out and you're well read. So obviously that translates to maybe it's a history degree, who knows? But curious on how you were then like given the nod to write the books, and then you're up to what, 5 or 6 now?
Yeah, 5 books in a journal, I think it is. So Jay Scott wrote the book on flipping houses. He wrote the whole book. Then he comes to Josh and he's like, hey, Josh, I wrote a book on flipping houses. They were friends. He's like, I wrote a book on flipping houses. I think I want to call it the book on flipping houses. So I can say I wrote the book on flipping houses. Would you want to publish it? And Josh was like, okay. So they negotiated a split. And like that day when I heard that, I was like, that's an incredible idea. I had never thought about writing a book like that. Right. I'm like, and I was like, Josh, I want the rental property book. I want to write the book on rental property because I knew rental property is way bigger than flipping. So I was like, I want to write the book on rental property investing. He's like, oh, okay, that's fine. So I started that one and actually ended up the first chapter ended up being 30,000 words on creative finance. So I put the pause on the book on rental property investing and I wrote the book on investing in real estate with no and low money down, since it was such a long chapter that turned that into its own book. And that's how the books came out. And so, yeah, today I'm at 5 or 6 books, something like that.
I'm going to read the titles. You tell me if I'm off because I want to plug my, I've read 3 of them. So we have How to Invest in Real Estate, The Ultimate Beginner's Guide, and they're co-author in there. The book on rental property investing, the book on managing rental properties, the book on investing in real estate with no and low money down, and The Multifamily Millionaire.
Correct. And The Multifamily Millionaire is technically 2 books, but like I heavily wrote the first volume, and then the second volume, Brian Murray, my partner, heavily wrote. And then we kind of like did it together. So it's 5 or 6 books, you could call it. And then I have the intention journal, which is just a journal that I actually use every single morning.
I'll tell you, just a little fun plug. You probably hear this all the time where you get recognized on the street. However, your How to Invest in Real Estate, the book on rental property investing, that's my Bible, dude. I have kept that for when we were starting real estate. I kept that on my passenger seat of my car, pull it out anytime I need it. And it's highlighted up and down. So it's amazing. And I highly recommend for anyone getting started. It's incredible. It's like literally the book. Sometimes there's a lot of like fat in books, right? And then you're like, okay, I just read the same thing over and over and over. I really appreciate how you gave the how-to guide, just like step by step. And when I read the book and I was done, I was like, I'm good. I'm ready to go. So for those who have not read it, I highly recommend it. And not just saying that because you're on the show.
My actual goal when I wrote that book, I remember literally saying out loud, I want to write like the only book somebody would have to read. I mean, you can read 100 books. You should read a lot of books. But I was like, I want to write the book, write the book. I'm glad you said that because I said, I want to write the book that when people read it, they're like, okay, I got it all. And so like, that was the goal when I wrote that. So that's super full circle for me right now that you said that. So thank you.
I'm glad. It's true.
Yeah. You want to know a cool story about that book? That relates to real estate investing today and helping especially newer people, but anybody invest in real estate. So when I wrote the first book, the No and Low Money Down, I wrote that one first. Like I said, it was a spin-off chapter. It took me a year to write that because I'd write whenever I felt like it, whenever I wanted to write. And it was hell. I hated writing every second of that. It was always like, oh, I got to write. I don't want to write. And then I'd be like, oh, I'm way behind. And this is taking forever. And I'd finally get in there and I'd write 2,000 words and then I wouldn't write for 2 weeks and then write 1,000 words and I'd get on an airplane and write. It was terrible. So then when I was going to write started the book on rental property investing, I was like, I'm going to approach this totally differently. And I started learning what other authors did and how they write. And I've got some best practices and I kind of combine them into this strategy. I call it the Starbucks strategy. I just made that up right now, but we're going to call it the Starbucks strategy. And, or we're going to call it the Abraham Lincoln chops down a tree strategy, because Abraham Lincoln once said, and it's probably not actually him that said it, but if you gave me 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend the first 4 sharpening my axe. So I went to Starbucks with my wife and we sat down and we said, we will not leave this room or the Starbucks until the entire book is outlined. Not just one book, but 2 books, because she was going to write the managing book with me and I was going to write the rental property one, and we were going to do them at the same time. So we sat down with a bunch of index cards and I made 100 index cards while at Starbucks. Every chapter was outlined, every subchapter was outlined, and the back of every card had bullet points of what I was going to talk about in that chapter or in that subsection, right? So when we walked out of Starbucks, we had 2 stacks of 100 note cards each. And it took, I think, 9 hours. Like we did not leave for 9 hours, but we walked out of there with this stack. And then I just made a rule. I said, I will not go to bed until I've written 1 card, at least 1,000 words. So every day, 1 card, 1,000 words, because that would be 100,000 word book. And I literally, for the next 100 days straight, I never missed a day. I wrote 1,000 words a day. It took less than 45 minutes every day, usually to write. I never had writer's block because on the back, it said exactly what to do. And all I had to do was pick up the card and write. And just the rhythm is what matters there. So I tell that story not because like I'm trying to tell people how to write a book, right? This is what success is in everything. It's defining what you need to do and then doing that regularly, consistently. Are you analyzing deals every day? Are you making offers every week or every day? Are you meeting with investors once a month? Are you going to meetups every other week? What are those things you have to do regularly that you can track and get some accountability? Define it, track it, get accountability, and you will accomplish anything faster than you ever thought was possible. And that
so I don't know if I just made this up right now either, but the whole, like, what it sounds like to me is almost like systematizing your discipline in a way. Yes. So you're like, you're kind of saying like, okay, well, how often am I motivated? It doesn't matter how often you're motivated because you can't count on motivation to get things done. You have to count on the disciplines. So like if you basically just systematize it and said, all right, well, this is sitting in front of me and I know what I have to do. There's no more excuses. It's just every day. And I've done like workout programs that are like that, like 75 hard. We've talked about it on the show a couple of times. And it's like, once you get in this routine of that, of the discipline, it's harder to say no than it is to say yes almost. So
that quote, it's easier to work out 7 days a week than 4 days a week. I've always loved that quote. It's easier to work out 7 days a week than 4 days a week.
Because then there's a decision almost like in your days. You're like, am I going to do it today? And it's really funny you say that. And I think it goes to really anything that you want to do or anything that you want to accomplish. So I love that. Have you read the book, The War of Art? Not The Art of War, which is like the Sun Tzu thing. The War of Art. By Stephen. I've heard of both, but I haven't read either. No.
Put that on your list. It's one of the greatest books of all time. The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. And he makes it, he's a writer and he talks a lot about writing, but it applies to anything that's entrepreneurial or goal related at all. And he makes this great quote. He said this great quote in the book. He says, I only write when I'm inspired. It's a good thing I'm inspired every day at 9 o'clock. In other words, like stop waiting for the motivation and the inspiration. Just get your butt in the chair and do the work that you're going to do. And like he calls it the muse, like the inspiration will come when you show up in the regular spot every day, day in and day out, and get the work done. This is how, like, if you want to know, like, how did I grow from 30 rental units to 7,400 over the past 3 years? It all boils down to two things. I hired JV/intern originally and now hire amazing people. Like we have 1,000 people apply for every position we put out there and we hire only one for each of those roles. So it's like we get the best of the best. But even more important than that is we simply define what is the boring task you need to do over and over and over. And then we track it and we're held accountable to it. Like that's it. Like that, those two things will make me a potentially billionaire someday just by having a team that does those two things, rock stars and boring work. That's it.
So it's almost like being the entrepreneur is for me and I come from a family of entrepreneurs and so does Ryan. It's difficult because the entrepreneur wants to do everything, right? Yeah. And I've noticed that just watching my family grow their business, that my dad and my uncle, just for example, they are the business. Yeah. There is no business without them. And you have created a way to remove yourself where, you're identified obviously because of who you are, but you're not the business because of the systems that you've built and the people that you've put in place to do the things that you know how to repeatably do. Would you agree with that? Like you're not the one doing it and the business exists without you. And I think that's the biggest thing for entrepreneurs, to get yourself out of the way almost.
Yeah. In fact, let's talk about it this way. Like this has been something I'm super passionate about, and I will almost for sure write a book on this in the future. Because I think it's like the one thing above almost anything else I wish I would have been taught at a younger age. So I'm preaching it left and right here. And that's this idea. Your mindset determines your actions, which determine your results. And what I mean by mindset is the way you approach a problem. So let's just say you wanted to start a carpet installation business. You think carpet is the future. You're going to start installing carpet. There are 4 basic approaches you could take to starting carpet. Almost everybody starts at this basic DIY level. Like the way they solve the problem in their head of starting a carpet company is they go and learn how to knee kit carpet. They learn how to, get customers. They do all the work themselves. And maybe someday they elevate their mindset and they start bringing in employees, or at least like they start bringing in help. They hire their brother-in-law to come actually lay the carpet or pick the carpet up from Home Depot, right? And then at the next, so there's the DIY level. I do it myself. There's the, what I call project manager level. You hire your brother-in-law to come help you, or you hire your mother-in-law to answer phones, right? That was my project manager. Then there's like the CEO level. I run a company. This is my company. I'm going to hire a bunch of people and I'm going to manage them. Think of you in the middle of a circle and those people all surround you. You are the core and they all report to you and they all do what you say. It's a pyramid, you can even say. You're at the top, you got all these lieutenants and people underneath you and VPs and all that. That's the COO or CEO level. That's a great level to be at. Nothing wrong with it. But then there's this other level that I call the energy or the architect or the brand. It's like what Richard Branson is or Elon Musk is or Kylie Jenner. Do you think Kylie Jenner actually made any of her makeup? Of course not. Do you think she even uses her makeup? Probably not. Is she a billionaire?
Who knows? I don't think she cares.
I don't think so. Yeah, she's a billionaire anyway, right? She is the brand or the energy. So these are the 4 mindsets that we approach business with. And almost everybody approaches it from the DIY standpoint. I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to figure it out. right? But here's the key, two things. Number one, no level is wrong, but every level has a limit, right? You can't flip 50 houses a year if you're doing all your own work yourself. You can't buy 1,000 rental units if you're doing it all yourself. So every level has a limit, but there's nothing wrong with it. If you like to be a DIYer, be a DIYer, do it all yourself. Who cares, right? The goal of the game determines the rules. But the second point is you do not have to start at the bottom. You get to choose. So what if instead you said, you know what? I don't want to lay carpet. I'm going to start a carpet company, but I'm going to be the energy. I'm going to be the brand behind it. I'm going to be the intelligence behind it, but I'm going to go hire that guy over there and pay him $250,000 a year to build my company for me. And he's going to be my CEO. And you could literally build a company from outside, not inside. And that's the point I'm trying to get here is like, you don't have to start at the bottom and over 30 years, work your way out of your job, out of your entrepreneurship business. You can literally start on the outside. And that's what I did for Open Door Capital. From day one, I was never in the company. Other than maybe as like the social media guy down at the bottom of the company, I was never in it. It's like Ryan started building it. Now Walker runs it today. It's fascinating when you realize that it's the mindset you approach. And if you want to get yourself into a different mindset, it's really simple. Just ask yourself, remember the WWJD bracelets from like the 90s and 2000s? Like, yes. What would Jesus do? It's like that, but like, what would Richard Branson do? What would Brandon Turner do? What would David? What would
Beardy Brandon do?
What would Beardy Brandon do? He would not pick up a knee kicker anymore. 10 years ago, I would have, but I wouldn't install carpet with a knee kicker. If I was going to start a flipping business, I wouldn't learn how to fix up houses, right? Like, think of what would that person do that gets you into their mindset and then solve the problem that way.
I have a real quick one on this. Yeah. I'm sure you do too. And this is probably super elementary kind of question here, but
no, please.
We just talked about your how-to book on real estate investing, right? And like how to get into it. I think real estate and business should be more intertwined than they are. I don't think a lot of people, you know, we've talked about this to treat it like a business if you want it to be profitable like a business. So I'm thinking a lot more people need to be educated on business as a whole, right? And I'm wondering if you have a book. You seem like I said, seems like you're well read and you've read 1 million books. Is there any that you've come across that stood out to you on the business level where it like helps you systematize and put people in the right positions? Because we think about this all the time, right? We have the podcast, we have our Instagram, we have our real estate business, and we still got our WHs. I'm like, how do we siphon everything off and give everybody their respective roles to make this thing run pure and efficient and save us some time, right? I know we all, like we talked about heavy and light, and like, I know what's light for me, Corey knows what's light for him, and we can go as fast as we can, but like, let's get ourselves in the right direction, then put someone else in the other position.
Yeah, let me give you a few books that'll completely change your like business life. I think these are the books that made some of the biggest impact on me. Number one, I would say, is The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. The E-Myth was phenomenal in thinking differently about business, about, again, working on your business, not in your business. It's called The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. Second book is Cash Flow Quadrant from Robert Kiyosaki. The book made a huge impact on me in the way I think about running a business and not being in it. The third book I'll give is, let's go 80-20 Sales and Marketing by Perry Marshall. That's such a phenomenal book for knowing like what's your time worth and how do you get other people to do the tasks that are not the highest and best use of your time. That just kills me every time I read that book. The fourth book I'd recommend is this one right here. It's called Traction by Gino Wickman. Traction is all about how to systematize your entire business, from the hiring to the goals to the vision, and to line everybody up in one like order. So like everybody knows what their role is in the organization, how they're getting there. It's accountability, it's tracking, it's goal setting, it's team accountability, it's everything all together into one system. And that's the system's called EOS, but the book that teaches it is called Traction. And those four books, probably more than any other, turned me from a wannabe business person, like a hobbyist, real estate investor, to a business owner that happens to do business in real estate. But I could take the lessons I learned from those four books and apply them to any other business, and I'd probably be fine.
It's incredible. Thank you.
I want to talk about your real estate portfolio now and just to paint the picture for people. But off of that topic, Brandon, like you have 7,400 units. You've gotten to this point now. How many hours do you think in a week, or I guess week would be the best way, are you spending on your Open Door Capital business at this stage in your career? I'm just curious because it'll frame it for people like a position that you can get to be to where you are.
Yeah. I mean, if I would average the year, probably less than 5 hours a week. Like in reality, it's probably less than 5 hours a week. The last month has been a lot heavier. I probably been putting more like 20 or 30 or 40 hours in some of the last few weeks, just because we're raising $75 million this month. It's crazy. It's like twice as much we've ever raised before. Probably like 3 times as much I've ever raised before in this amount of time. So I've been putting a lot more effort in, but no, yeah, it's usually like 3, 4, 5 hours a week. I meet with my team once in a while. And this is the magic of that pyramid. I said earlier, not pyramid, but the levels earlier I said, right? The DIY, the project manager, the CEO, and then like there's like visionary architect energy role is the higher up you go in that, the less you have to work, yet the more you make, right? Think of like who works the most hours at McDonald's? The DIYers, the guys that are at the front line working the counter, right? Who works the least amount of hours? The owner, he's golfing, right? So like the higher up you go, the less you have to work because you have people that run all those things. So the challenge I just have for people is if you want to, like, again, you can start that way from day one, especially if you have a brand online, because you can bring people in the way that I did. Now, you might not be able to have 1,000 people apply for your jobs or your internships, but like you can bring people in to different organizations and your entire job is simply to maintain the company, like morale and direction. Like you're the visionary, you drive it, let somebody else run it.
Did you have to release yourself from the identity of the company in order to do that? Or were you never tied to it that way? Like, and that I just asked that because I know a lot of entrepreneurs are their business and it's hard for them to get out of it. Or did you not even have that problem?
Yeah, that's a good question. With Open Door Capital, I never really had that. I made a conscious choice from the beginning. How am I going to build this without being in it all the time? Tim Ferriss asked that question in the 4-Hour Work Week. He says, like, if you had a gun to your head and you could only work 4 hours a week, what would you do? Like those questions are powerful because like they give you the better answers that you need. And so like, if I was like, I have 2 little kids at home, I'm not going to build some massive real estate empire that makes me work 80 hours a week. That's not why I got into real estate. Right? I got into real estate to have flexibility and freedom. So I've traveled about half the year, the last like 3 years. I took 4 months and went to Europe and a trip around the whole country this year. And I'm still growing. Like we've doubled this year in size, and I was gone for almost the entire year traveling somewhere. So it's totally doable if you get that mindset right and you build a machine versus just doing it all yourself.
So on a smaller scale, I'm thinking about like building a machine. There's a lot of people that, well, for example, let's just say us, we're not at the point where we can go spend 40, 50 grand and hire someone to come in. Yeah. You could get an intern, right? Maybe like a younger brother, something like to help out with social. But do you think a good leeway or like segue into this is hiring a VA? Cause you know, we have not hired one yet, but there's a lot of tasks that you've heard what we've been doing. And it's, even though it's on a smaller scale, there's so many different moving parts for 2 guys. It's our 3 guys. We have a producer too. It's hard to maintain. And we're kind of teetering with the idea of hiring a virtual assistant. We've heard a lot about them, but we just haven't done it yet. So do you have any experience there? And did that help you segue up into hiring a full-time employee?
Yeah, virtual assistants are great. I've hired numerous ones. In fact, I got one right now. He's an amazing dude in the Philippines. The thing to be aware of is just like in America or in any place you hire them, majority of people suck and there's very few that are good. And so the most important thing you can do is make sure you filter through the good ones. Just because they're a virtual assistant doesn't mean they're good. It means they're probably bad. Just like if you hire any employee or you buy any rental house, they're probably bad, right? You got to filter through. So I do a series of tests. If you're looking for a video editor, like put the ad out there, make it like you pay above average because like you'll get better people. You get a ton of applicants and then sort through and make them do 3, 4, 5 different tests. Most people will not even finish the test. And those people are good. You should get them out. We call it the gauntlet. We run everything through it. And so at the end of the day, you end up with somebody who's done 3, 4, 5 tests. You've been impressed with them the whole time. You do a phone call and then you hire them. And then you give them very specific instructions. This is the thing with VAs that my very first VA, his name was Dave. He was awesome. He still is awesome. He still works for BiggerPockets actually to this day. I hired him 10 years ago. And Dave, the first year, he did almost nothing. And people kept telling me I should fire him because I'm paying $300 or $400 a month for this guy and he's not doing anything. But I never fired him because I was like, no, he's not doing anything because I haven't given him anything to do. I didn't know how to manage a virtual assistant. So I throw things once in a while like, hey, can you do this thing for me? But what I say today is again, I said it earlier, define the boring tasks that have to be done over and over and over. So if you're you write that down and here's instruction on how to do it, or make them make their own instructions on how to do it if you trust them, and give them, this is what your job looks like. You do this thing, and then we're going to track it inside of a system, which is where that book Traction comes in really helpful. So nobody's getting lost in the system and you can't hide. You got metrics that drive that person, and it just works. So yeah, virtual assistants, amazing way to do it. That book I mentioned, 80-20 sales and marketing, talks a lot about virtual assistants as well. And if you want a recommendation, I've gotten almost all my VAs off of a site called onlinejobs.ph. I'm sure there's a million out there. I've had a lot of success with that. Onlinejobs.ph. I think it's like $100 a month, and you can cancel once you get your person.
It's a great recommendation.
Cheap. Upwork's a great one as well.
We had a gentleman named Axel Ragnarsson. He was back maybe like 10 episodes ago.
Yeah.
He recommended both the same. So you guys are both killing
awesome.
it. So those are really, use those two if you're listening.
Exactly. And then date before you get married. Like if you can find, I mean, granted, VAs are pretty easy to fire if they don't work out well. But for a real employee, that's why I like internships. My COO that runs my company was an intern. My head of investor relations, Mike, was an intern. Ryan, who was the original COO, he kind of ran the whole thing, and now he's just on the board with me. He wanted a little bit higher level in less work role. Like Ryan was just a partner. I didn't pay him a salary. I gave him equity. And so you don't have to spend a lot of money either bringing people in. You can bring in interns. You can bring in programs. You can do imagine if you two you started, let's say you wanted to grow your rental business, right? So every Saturday for 9 weeks, you're going to have a race to your first deal event at a local library. You're going to get 50 people to show up, and you're going to just crush it for the time. Whoever's left at the end of 9 weeks, you're going to hire that person because they're a rock star, right? Because they showed up 9 weeks in a row and they actually did what they said they're going to do. Then you're going to bring them into your world. You're going to give them a split of deals or whatever. You date and then you get married. So without any money whatsoever, you can get that involved. Now, granted, if you give equity, that's just, that might cost you way more if you're going to grow, but
that's got to be someone that you're ready to get married to for life.
That sounds exactly. Yeah. But there's also JV. I mean, JV stuff is super easy in real estate, right? Hey, your job. I mean, imagine this. What's the biggest thing, the boring tasks that have to be done in our world, right? It's usually analyzing deals and getting leads and analyzing them. That's pretty much the two boring. If you had somebody full time or even 20 hours a week, sending out direct mail. That's all they had to do is I want you to send out 5,000 letters every single week. That's your job. That's all you have to do. Come to me. I'll help you figure it out, but that's your job. If they did that, are you going to get the phone ringing? Guaranteed. Now, if you told them, hey, any deal that we land that you bring in, you're going to get 15% of that profit that we make on that deal. Well, now all of a sudden, shoot, this person is going to work for no money just to make you happy and to make some money at the back end. And then you don't want to answer phones either. So you hire a sales guy. You're hey, your only job is to answer phone calls. Now, I hate that, but some guys love it, right? Now they're answering phones. They're negotiating with the motivated sellers. They're landing these deals for you. What are you doing? You're playing golf. You're meeting with your team once or twice a week, right? Because you're building your education platform because that brings in more people, right? That's thinking at the higher level mindset versus I'm going to do it all myself and eventually hire some guy to help me here. You're just saying I'm going to build this machine right here and I'm going to let it run.
I want to transition a little bit into mobile home parks. So if you could just kind of break down this investing strategy for us. I mean, why the heck did you decide to go and pursue this? It seems so different from anything else we've talked about aside from multifamily, small multifamily, and then single family homes.
Yeah. My son right now is really big into water balloons. He just loves them for whatever reason. He's thrown over 4,000 water balloons in the past month. It's insane. That's not an exaggeration that we counted because we buy them in the packs of 420 from Costco and we've gone through 12 of them. So that's almost that's 5,000.
This guy's got does he have the launcher?
No, he just fills up 100 water balloons at a time and then just throws them over the deck. Just all day long. Just loves it, right? Why does he like water balloons? I have no idea. Something in his soul just says water balloons, or how he calls them, wah-wah balloons. Wah-wah balloons are passion for him, right? I don't know why that is. I don't know why I felt when I first heard about mobile home parks, I was like, that's awesome. I felt a passion for it. But when I first heard about vacation rentals, I was like, that sounds like a lot of work, right? For whatever reason, certain things appeal to certain people for reasons we will never understand. I always instruct people or try to help people understand, it doesn't really matter what you do in real estate. It all works. The most important thing is follow that fire. Whatever that fire in your belly is, follow it. That's why I buy my son 5,000 water balloons. I want him to always follow after his passions, whatever they are. And I encourage new investors that way as well. So find something that you can be passionate about. Now you won't stay passionate forever, but find something you're passionate about it and just go all in. Say, how can I be the best? So I just interviewed a few people on our podcast on mobile home parks. And every time I did, I would walk away from those interviews going, yeah, that was awesome. So then after a couple of years of that, I finally made the decision that I need to do more. I need to get bigger in real estate. I wanted a challenge. I wanted to climb the mountain even higher. And I was like, well, what am I going to focus on? And for a long time, I didn't know. And finally, I read this, actually, within this book, I read this line in the book, Traction. He said, it is more important that you decide than what you decide. And I was like, oh, like, I just need to make a choice. It doesn't matter. I was like, fine, mobile home parks. Those always fire me up. Let's go all in. And I was like, I'm going to be the best, biggest, fastest mobile home park investor in America. And I'm going to not stop until I am. And that's what we did. And so now we bought in thousands and thousands of mobile home park units, and we're still buying about $100 million every year of mobile home parks.
Brandon, I equate that to Gary Vee, who always tells people, especially young millennials, even younger millennials than us, like, it doesn't really matter like what you do. You just got to do a bunch of stuff. You got to try a bunch of things to then figure out what it is that actually makes you tick, right? And if you don't try a bunch of things, you may never even get to that thing that really makes you tick. So try a bunch of things. I love that. So I want to go through the process of maybe a little bit more detail here about the mobile home parks and the buying process and like how they work and how they maybe differ from multifamily and like why you felt that it would be your sweet spot once you got going with it.
Yeah, a couple of things really appealed to me. I mean, one is like in a recession, and I knew a recession would come eventually. I mean, here we are in one now, probably. But like I knew a recession was coming, and I figured low-income housing is a good place to be when they're not making enough of it, and there's a lot of people that need it. And it's an increasing problem. So like, I want to be in front of that. Wayne Gretzky once said, I don't skate to where the puck is. I skate to where the puck is going. I want to invest to where the puck is going, where the future is going, where are the problems that are getting worse. Low income housing is a problem that's getting worse and worse and worse every year in America. Poor people aren't becoming any less, and housing for them is becoming even less and less. So like, it's a problem I want to get in front of, and I want to help. Like, I can help those people. So that fired me up a lot. Second thing that fired me up is that in a recession, rents tend to compress from the top down. In other words, people paying $4,000 a month in rent, when the going gets tough, they tighten their belt and they go down to $3,000 rental units. But the guy paying $300 for his lot rent is not suddenly going negative $700 a month or whatever. Like he's not going negative, right? It might not drop at all. In fact, I would argue that it actually goes up because as it compresses, it pushes everyone down a notch, and it starts to bulge at the bottom, and the rents actually start to go up, and it stabilizes somewhere in the middle there. So in other words, I like the idea of, should a recession come, I like the idea of being in low income housing because that's there's going to be a never ending supply of potential tenants. Also, the thing that really got me excited in the beginning was I don't like dealing with toilets and construction. And I thought that by owning mobile home parks, I wouldn't have to, because a tenant owns their own home. At least the parks that we buy, they're mostly tenant owned homes. I own the land, they own the house. Now, I was completely wrong in that assumption. We deal with construction constantly because what happens is we get homes back. We have to move new homes in. We're trying to infill, it's called, trying to fill up these parks. So we deal with contractors continually and often. So I may have been wrong on that, but I don't pick up a toilet anymore. I don't talk to contractors because I built a machine and the machine deals with the contractor. So it ended up being not a big deal.
So the whole idea behind the mobile home parks is that the maintenance and everything, at least the way that you buy, the maintenance and everything that goes into maintaining the property is on the tenant because they own their home. And then you're just essentially collecting that lot fee. So unless there's an earthquake that goes through there, you have a pretty secure lot that it doesn't have a lot of, upkeep, so to speak.
Yeah, it's very stabilized rent because expenses are all on the tenant for the most part. Like they pay their own water, sewer, garbage, electricity, all that. They do their own maintenance. So really, I got to pay like snow removal if it's in a snowy area, like lawn care sometimes in the public areas, and maintain the roads, set aside money for the road repairs. And it's a pretty simple model. The hard part is the management. I mean, by far, the hard part is the management of mobile home parks. I don't know of a single large property manager that's good at mobile home parks. So I built my own. Like we have a company, it's called Open. It's a management company that we built to do mobile home parks because I could not find somebody that cared about our mobile home parks. The same thing you guys said earlier. It's hard to find people who will care about what you care about and that will give you and not just rip you off. So we just built it in-house, built another machine.
Very cool. Can you walk us through a sample deal and just maybe what you bought it for, what it cash flows for, if you still have it, and just I just want to compare it in my head to like a multifamily or a single family home, just so that way people can kind of conceptualize how these things are like on paper.
Sure. I'll give you our very first one, which is kind of fun. We bought a mobile home park in Ohio. It was Northern Ohio. And then we bought another one at the same time. I think it was northern Minnesota. It might have been northern Wisconsin. We bought them for a combined $7 million. Combined between all of them was about 400 or 500 units. I think it was like 450 something, maybe combined between everything. We got it for 7 million. I don't remember what like the NOI was or any of that, which people probably don't care that much anyway. But the thing cash flowed from day one. Like we made money from day one. We made money. We fixed them up. But the main thing that we do is we add units in. So we are really good at infilling, putting units in. We sold it 2 years later, almost to the day. I think 2 years later, we sold it for 13.5. So from 7, or it was like 6.8 to like 13.5 in a year and a half or 2 years. Which again, that was a phenomenal deal. Our investors got like a 35% per year IRR, like a return. But it shows the possibility why I like mobile home parks, just because you can buy them for like imagine buying a 400 or 500 unit apartment complex for $7 million. Like that would be crazy, right? Because they're more like $50 million. So the cost per unit is much lower. It doesn't mean the cash flow is always better. In fact, we still have to, make 10 or 20 offers before we buy one deal. It still is a hard funnel to get through. But we also, analyze 900 deals a year or something crazy like that. So to be able to buy a few dozen. So
I know you had I heard it on the podcast a while back, but you had like very specific criteria you were looking for, and people were bringing you deals and things like that. Very cool.
It's because you can only be good at so many things. So you might as well be the best at a smaller amount of things. Like if you're like, I'm going to be a real estate investor in Cincinnati. Okay, great. But what if instead you were like, I buy duplexes in Cincinnati and that's all I do. You would be so good at duplexes. You'd make a way better profit than everyone else because you know that niche better than everyone else. The riches are in the niches, as they say.
I think that's really hard to do, actually. A lot easier said than done. Like we're in this point where we're like, okay, we bought single family and duplexes. And then we're like, wait, like the return on that is it. And actually your good friend, David Green, told us this. He's like I forget the word he used, but he was like diminishing returns. Like you get to a point of diminishing returns, continuing to buy duplexes because it's like the amount of time and energy and effort that goes into buying a 20, 30, 40, 50 unit might actually be the same as buying duplexes, unless you're talking about what you are, which is maybe getting so good at it that you're getting all the deals, right? So there's a balance there. But now we found ourselves going into short term a little bit, going into more syndications. What I'm afraid of is the shiny object syndrome. I don't want that to happen, but I just kind of feel like we're following some trends. And maybe could you speak to that actually a little bit on like whether you think the trend following is a good thing? I guess it depends on your goals probably, right? But
yeah, it does depend on your goals. But I think so many people try to follow the trends or try to follow their like momentary passion, where like, oh, I like self-storage. I like mobile home parks. I like apartments. I like duplexes. The problem is, and I'm not saying you can't survive that way. Again, the goal of the game is the rules of the game are determined by the goals of the game. But like in today's competitive market, to make above average returns, you have to be incredible. It's not 2012 anymore where you just buy any house that you like walk by and make money, right? Like you got to be really good. And when you get really good, you can buy a lot more and you can see things that other people don't see. That's how we're really good at mobile home parks. We can see things that other people don't see. We're really good at apartment complexes in Texas. We can see things that other people don't see because we have that experience. Now, there is a problem when you get too niche down, right? If you're only buying duplexes with red doors in Cincinnati, there's like 4 of them, right? You're not going to get them. That's why we actually added apartments, because we couldn't buy enough mobile home parks for what we can raise. At the end of the day, the only restriction, there's only 2 restrictions on your growth: your mindset and your money. And even the money it falls into the mindset. But what I mean by that is like, if you had $1 billion, like you had an uncle who's like, yeah, I will fund you up to $1 billion. You would be able to, if you were smart enough and had the mindset to be able to grow, you could put his entire $1 billion to use in real estate. But if you only have $1,000, there's a lot less you can do in real estate. So you're limited. Like the constraint point is the money and the mindset that you bring to the table. And so, yeah, you can, it's just as easy to buy a 50 unit as it is the duplex, but it's also 10 times more expensive. So if you can buy the 50 unit all day long, I would go that. If you can raise the money in the 50 unit, yes, I would do that all day long. I would not waste time with the duplex. But for most people, especially those listening to shows like this, like they can't just go buy a 50 unit. Don't, like Grant Cardone says, start with 100 unit or more. I'm like, no, make the mistakes on the little deals. Like figure out what you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. So figure that out and then jump into the bigger deals. Or The way, and I know this is what Grant actually means when he says this, like partner with somebody who does the bigger deals and you can learn from their mistakes and what they've done wrong. And so you don't have to start at the bottom. You could start higher. I mean, my team, my COO didn't own a single piece of real estate until he bought a large chunk with us. And now he owns a big piece of a $650 million portfolio.
It's incredible.
Amazing.
Yeah. I think you mentioned this on other podcasts, but like when you go in with a partner, you're finding someone to go in and deal with you. Like either money's lacking or hustle's lacking. And then if you can marry the two, then you're going to be off to the moon. So I kind of want to talk to this briefly. And I know we touched on it a little bit throughout the episode, but like sourcing money and raising private capital, I think we're getting to the point where you mentioned like you have a platform, people like, know, and trust you. And they're like, hey, do you have any deals? We have money. Like, what can I put this into? And we're getting to the point where we're now having deals sourced to us from another funnel. And then we're starting to be able to marry the two. So just like any tips and tricks for like putting these things together. I know I've been on opendoorcapital.com. I saw you guys have a great like executive summary for deals. And then there's a lot of like marketing that goes into it. And I'm kind of wondering like what you feel people need to see to feel comfortable to put their cash into a property that you have under contract.
Yeah, people need confidence and they need clarity. Like if you can deliver those two things to them, like they will buy. The confused mind doesn't buy, or in this case, invest. So if you were like, I mean, I'll give you an example. So we had a one of the things that we do in mobile home parks, right, is we infill. Again, I said that earlier. We bring new homes or existing homes, old homes, whatever. We bring them in, we set them up, we remodel them, and then we sell them to tenants who want to own their own home within one of our parks. That whole process takes a lot of money. Right? I mean, like it takes us about 30 grand, let's call it, to find a home, to move it, to set it up and get it ready to sell. So where's that 30 grand come from? So here's the idea that we had. And I still think it's a pretty genius move. We would basically borrow the 30 grand from you. Let's say I borrow from you guys, right? You give me 30 grand. I go find the house. I set it up. I can, get everything ready. And then I sell it on seller financing to a tenant at, let's call it 7% or 8% interest. So the tenant is paying me 8% interest on the $30,000 that they're buying it from me. I am paying you 8% interest on the $30,000 that I borrowed from you. In other words, I borrowed the 30 from you and I'm paying you 8%. I'm selling it to the tenant. They're paying me 8%. So what do I have out of pocket at that point? Nothing. No money out of pocket, right? So now I just filled in a home into my park with no money out of pocket. It's a really cool strategy, right? And every home that I bring in adds about $50,000 of value to my park. So I just created $50,000 out of thin air just by taking your money and bringing that person, and I'm playing the middleman there. All right, so we pitched this idea because now we needed people like you. We needed people to give me not 30 grand, but I needed like $3 million because we got a lot of them, right? So I go to a bunch of people. We put it out there to our whole list. We said, hey, this is the idea. We're going to borrow money from you at a good, like a fixed interest, like 8%. We're going to pay you every month. We're going to do this. We're going to give it to the tenant. We're going to blah, 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 blah. No one took us up on it. No one cared. No one, like, there's just no interest whatsoever. And I was like, man, like, this is actually a really good deal. It's like secured with like a personal like guarantee from me and from Brian, both multimillionaires. It's got the real estate thing there. Like I'm basically guaranteeing it. Like if the tenant doesn't pay, I'm going to pay it anyway. Like it's a really nice, stable 8% return, which is what the stock market gives on average. Better than that. Anyway. So here I am like going, why can't I get anybody? And finally I realized because it took too long to explain. So I was like, all right, scratch this. It's now called the Mobile Home Impact Program. It's got 3 steps. Step 1, you give us minimum $250,000. Step 2, you get 8%. Step 3, we take care of the rest. It was like literally that simple, right? And I was like, hey, everybody, I've got this new program. It's called the Mobile Home Impact Program. We're putting people in America in homes. And all of a sudden we had like dozens of people going, yeah, I want that. I'm in. Right. So what changed? Nothing but the messaging. I gave them clarity and I gave them confidence. It wasn't like, hey, I think I have an idea. I think this thing will work. I think blah, blah, blah. It was, no, this is the program. Yes or no. So give people clarity, give people confidence, and they're going to be interested in what you do, which is why we put a lot of effort into our website, into our marketing, into the names we give things. I mean, we have the Sunbelt portfolio. We got the Texas 2-step. We've got like all this stuff that we do that are designed to just make things simple and easy to understand. So that's the biggest thing I can say is like, just make it simple to understand, make it clean, make it pretty, and people will be on board.
It almost sounds, it's funny from somebody who hasn't done what you've done, but it sounds counterintuitive almost. Mm-hmm. It sounds like this needs to be complicated, but it doesn't.
You want to go real crazy on that. So I sat with this this investor I mentioned earlier, like this godfather of real estate who like just like has done all like tons of deals, like really like big time guy. And I'm explaining like all the stuff we're doing to raise money. And he kind of laughed and he's like, Brandon, I don't do any of that stuff. He's like, I just pull out a whiteboard and I draw a couple pictures of houses on it. And I say, we're buying it for 15 million. We're going to put 5 million into it. It should be worth about 30 million in a couple of years. We're going to hold it forever. Are you interested? And they're like, and he's like, I don't do a webinar, an hour and a half long webinar. I don't have an 85-page executive summary like you do. He's like, so even like me who's teaching this, like be simple, I just got like schooled on what simplicity actually means. And this guy said he has never had a problem raising capital ever. It's just because he's just like whiteboard, picture, this is what we're doing. And he's got the people know, like, and trust him. At that point, just give them clarity and they'll give them confidence and they're in.
Dude, that is like, because the author, I feel like one of the reasons our show has been small success, like a tiny bit of success, because we're really authentic and we just like, we're sharing our story. This is who we are. This is what we're doing. And people like it, even if it's a small amount of people like it. But the amount of people that have reached out to us about like trying to like, what are you guys doing? We seem to like you. And like, now that I have that in my head, I know that we don't have to make it more complicated. That was some of the best advice that I've heard on the show. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Keep it simple.
Did you have something you want to go into, Ryan?
No, I really did. First, I want to thank you for that because that provided me clarity on what I have to do next, and it's going to help. So I actually wanted to transition a little bit towards like financial independence and like life hacks. So I know you're a husband, father, and family man, and I think that's nice to just like touch a little bit on that outside real estate and just kind of talk to like your why on things. But can you just talk to like why financial independence is important to you and like what it means to you? Because you're doing a lot of things on a daily basis, sourcing tons of money and just allowing yourself a lot of freedom. I know you moved to Hawaii. Like there's just a lot of things that go with it. So I kind of just give us your backstory on that and like what this whole thing means to you.
Yeah, man. So when I got into real estate in the beginning, one of the things that drew me to it was I looked at how my upbringing was. My dad was a meat cutter, right? He worked so many hours, he worked a lot of Sundays, a lot of weekends, a lot of nights. And I saw him, but not as much as like I wanted to as a young boy, right? Looking up to his dad. And I love my dad. He worked his tail off so that we could have a decent life. But I remember like at a young age, even saying like, I want to make sure when I'm a father someday, that I would be there for every ball game and every, field trip. And like, I want to be present every day with my kids. And that's what drew me to real estate originally was like, I knew I could get that. And it's not that I didn't want to do any work. Again, that was a few months of sitting on the couch doing nothing when I was 27. I figured out that was horrible, but I wanted the flexibility, right? And that's what real estate allows you to do almost better than anything else in the world. It gives you flexibility because unlike business doesn't get less complicated over time. Like when you run a business, like it's still a lot of complications, but real estate's unique in that it gets better every year and gets easier every year you own a property. Like it just gets more and more and more and more stable and it gets easier and easier and easier to run it. And the systems are so well defined because millions and millions of people do it that it's really easy to like I don't use the word easy very often, but it's very easy to build a portfolio compared to almost any other business out there because it's been done by millions of people. It's such a clear path through the woods because it's been trekked by millions of people. So today, I'm very, very big on family. I love my kids and I can't spend every waking minute playing Legos or Barbies, but I dedicate a lot of time to it. And the way that I do that is I schedule my business around my life events as much as possible. In other words, I time block dates with my wife. I time block time with my kids. In fact, I owe my daughter a date. I told her I was going to take her on a date and we're going to go to the arcade. And I need to put that in my schedule. And then phone calls, investor calls, podcast appearances, social media videos, analyzing deals, all that fits around the family, not the other way around. Majority of people give their families the leftovers, not the main course. And so the biggest encouragement I can have on that front for people is treat your family like the main course that they are and give your work the leftovers. You'll fit it all in that way. But that's been huge for me. And I also track things. I even have every morning, in my journal, I track, did I have 10 minutes of uninterrupted connection time with my wife yesterday, where it's just us talking. And I don't hit it every day, but when I miss it a couple of days in a row, I see that there's a dash on my tracking. And I'm like, oh shoot, I got to make sure, what can I do to change that? It really just boils down to, are you in the driver's seat or are you in the passenger seat of your life? Get in the driver's seat. We have that ability and real estate makes that possible.
we use the design, like be the architect of your life. So I love that, because I think you're in a lot more control than you think of your life.
Yeah,
and
so true.
And I just think that if you just approach it that way, there's so much more to make of it. So
it kind of goes on the same topic as like you have the concept of MINS. Can you walk us through that? I think that's for like goal setting and kind of like, also being more efficient with your life. Can you talk to that?
For sure. All right. So I'm a big goal fan. Like I love goals long term, right? I love like I'm going to buy $10 billion of real estate over the next 10 years. That's one of my goals, right? But that goals become so like far out that like they don't have any like action steps to do it. So I'm a big believer of taking your big goal like down the road and then saying, how can I, like, what do I need to do this year to be on track for that 10-year goal? And then what do I need to do this quarter to be on track for my, my annual goal? And then what do I need to do this week? Like actually sit down this week and be on goal for my quarterly goal. And then what do I need to do today to be on track for my week? And then what do I need to do now to be on track? And so the reason I think this is so powerful, I learned this from the book, The One Thing, from Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. They call it goal setting to the now. But then I took this idea of this going to the very, very next thing you need to do and really define what that is. Because people, like most every piece of success in life comes down to a series of 5-minute or less tasks. Send an email, send a text, make a phone call, run the numbers on this deal, call that broker, right? There's just like these little tiny things you got to do. And so all you have to do is like playing a game of football. Just drive the ball down the field 3 yards at a time. If you always drove the ball 3 yards down the field every single play, you would be unstoppable. But people see football and they think, oh, the big Hail Mary, that's the exciting stuff. Yeah, but if you just always drove the ball 3 yards every single time, you would never lose a game ever. So what is the smallest tangible thing you can do today? And it's like people will say things like, well, I need to find a deal. No, get more tangible. Okay, I need to find an agent. Get more tangible. How are you going to do that? I guess I'm going to post on my Instagram or sorry, my Facebook to my family and friends asking for a recommendation for an agent. I was like, okay, so you're saying your entire goal of financial freedom, spending more time with your kids, traveling the world, owning a private jet, your entire life, this incredible future you have planned for yourself all boils down to writing a Facebook post? What? Like that's everything in your life boils down to that moment is the most important thing. It is the most important next step. MINS, MINS. And all of a sudden when you do that practice, and it only takes like 10 seconds to do it, you go, oh, okay, I just got to make that my Facebook post. You do it. And then you ask yourself, okay, now what is my most important next step? And the frequency and the rate at which you ask that question and then either do or schedule that event, that is how you get the results. And that's how you move rapidly through life. Because most of the time we just like go days or weeks or months before we even ask ourselves, what do I actually have to do to move this ball forward? So if you're a manager, that's how you should be managing your team, is continually ask them, what's the most important next step you got to do? Every morning when you wake up, look at your goal and say, okay, what's the most important next step I can do? And then do it or schedule it.
I've heard you use this analogy on like rocket science too on the podcast, which made me laugh. But you were saying your point is that even rocket science, as difficult as, well, I don't even know what it is, right? But like as difficult as it is
a bunch of
broken down into these small tasks. You know, so it's I love that, and I think it's hard for people to get in that frame of mind. But if you can accomplish that, the sky's the limit. So we go into the core four. I know we kind of went over time here, but I mean, just the conversation has been amazing. So we talked about your books, and that's actually what the core four, kind of similar to what we did on BP, or you guys do on BP. 4 questions, get to know you a little bit more, although I felt like we have. So we were going to ask what your favorite business or investing book is, but you've named like 12 books on the podcast. So I think we'll tell you, Rye, your favorite business book or your favorite real estate investing book is Brandon's book, right?
100%. I already said it. It's my Bible. I used, and I know you're a man of faith, and I'm not trying to like go left field here, but that's my Bible, dude. I've said it on 5,000 podcasts that we've done here, and it sits shoddy with me everywhere I go. So I appreciate that. I highly recommend it. So yeah, I'll start.
Cool. Because he's named so many books, so I didn't want to bore him with
Traction's the one that he's named. I think that's where we should stay.
A lot. And by the way, I did not like this book when I first read it. I read it. I was not in the right mindset to be able to receive it. So you might read it right now and be like, somebody might listen to us and be like, I don't get the book. It's just not for me. You might pick it up 3 years later and it'll change your life. That's what happened for me.
So we'll go to question 2 then. And this question won't mean a lot to you now, but picture yourself in somebody who's just starting out shoes. So let's say that somebody gave someone $50,000. If it's you, that's fine. But like in 2022, just starting out, if you were given $50,000, like how would you allocate that money? Like, let's say you have that saved up and you want to put it into a deal or invest in yourself. I'm just curious from your perspective, what's the best way to allocate it?
Yeah, if it were me, I'd probably spend. I mean, I'd put it in a bank and not touch it for a while. And I would spend a lot of time digging into that. Like, what am I going to be the number one world's best at? Let's say you want it, like $50,000 is a good amount of money, but once it's gone, right? So what you really want to focus on at that point, if you don't expect more money to be coming, is how do you amplify that money? David Green talks about amplifying money and then growing money or investing money, right? Amplifying is like, or you call it multiplying money, right? Like, I'm going to take the 50 and turn it into 100. I'm going to take the 100, turn it into 200. You do that through business. So let's say you need to amplify that money or multiply that money. I would look at the 50 as a really good amount of money to flip houses or to wholesale deals right now. It's not the world's best time to flip houses, but it's still doable. Because 50,000 would get you more than enough for the down payment and the repairs on an average flip. A hard money lender would take your money. You could get a flip done. Just, it's also risky, right? Especially this time in the market, and flips in general are just risky with the amount that can go wrong. So I still would probably work on that because I think you could turn the 50 to 100 pretty easily. And then you could turn the 100 to 150 and the 150 to 200. And then at that point, you're really good at flipping houses. And so, or you could do the burst strategy, same thing, basically. And then I could take that money and start buying rentals with it. Like with, every other flip goes to your, one flip goes to your lifestyle. Next flip goes to buying a rental, lifestyle, rental, until you feel like you have enough experience to start raising money and bringing in partners. And then you can scale into the multifamily.
Cool. Appreciate it. So third question is, what's been your biggest mistake that you've made along your investing journey, and how have you learned from it?
Yeah. I mean, there's a few like deals, like there's one particular, I've only ever lost money on one deal, and it was a flip that I did that I bought for like 50. I put like, I don't know, almost 100 into it. I tried to sell it for like 170 or 160. It didn't sell. I ended up selling it for like 130 and I lost like 20 grand or 15 grand. I don't know, somewhere in there. Like the reason I say that's like one of the biggest mistakes, but also a really good lesson, that house is worth $500,000 today. So like I sold it for 100 and whatever, 130 something. It's worth $500,000. Real estate is a very forgiving asset class in the long time span, over a long time span. And so had I kept that house, not only would I have cash flowed, it was actually a duplex. I turned it into a house. It would have cash flowed from day one. I would have had to do way less work on it. It would have been worth way more money. And so the lesson there was like, I really wanted to flip a house because I was watching the flipping shows back then, all these flipping TV shows, and I should have kept it as a rental. I should have looked at the highest and best use of it and then kept it. Real estate, like if you hold it long enough, it covers all sins.
I don't think I've ever heard, you do tell me if you've heard somebody say this, but I've never heard somebody say, dang, I wish I wouldn't have held on to that property or something. Like it's just, so I'm of the mindset, and this is why I asked you the question earlier. It's like, I want to hold on to stuff as long as possible, but I do realize there's certain things that you can trade up in order to scale. But it's like every time you hold it there's going to be downturns, and like we may or may not be going into one, and you just got to hold through. And we didn't invest in 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, like through that. So we're not exactly experiencing that. I know a lot of people lost their shirts, but if those people would have held and had the sustainability in their cash flow to hold, they'd probably be in a great position today.
Which is why cash flow is the defensive metric. It allows you to hold it long enough to get through hard times so you can sell it in the good times. Like that's it. That's what cash flow is good for.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to bait you to admit a mistake of a property that you recently sold that is semi-famous, but clearly I don't think it's a mistake to you. Can you just bring this up? I actually meant to bring it up earlier in the show, but it's so cool. And it's just a little fun fact about you. I personally think that this property could have been a cool little Airbnb experience. I don't know if you could even edit it or renovate it, but can you just talk about the property? And it's a little bit of a surprise, so I don't want to tell people what it is.
Yeah, no. So I told you guys earlier, the very beginning of my story, I bought a single family house, rented out the bedrooms, then I sold it, made 25 grand. And then I moved into a duplex. And that duplex was actually two houses on one lot. There was a back house in the alleyway, like literally like my bedroom window, because I lived in that little house. The bedroom window was in the alley, like 6 inches from the alley. Cars would drive by all night. People would do drugs in the alley. It was great. And then the front house was another little 2-bedroom, 1-bath house up there. That house, after we moved out, we had some tenants that called us. They said over a couple of years, we heard from numerous tenants actually that people were taking pictures of the house, and we never understood why they were taking pictures of the house. I assumed it was like the county was just coming and doing regular whatever reassessments or something like that. And finally, we figured out what it was when somebody knocked on the door. Some Swedish tourists. This is in Aberdeen, Washington. Some Swedish tourists knocked on the door, and they wanted a tour of the Kurt Cobain house. And we had no idea, but this was Kurt Cobain's very first house he lived in as a baby. So, I mean, he moved out when he was 2 years old, but he actually lived in both houses, front and back houses when he was born. In fact, on his birth certificate or like his birth and whatever announcement, whatever, it's my address of my house was there on Kurt's birth certificate.
Wow.
Which is crazy.
So you did sell it or you still have it?
I sold it last year.
You sold it last year. Okay.
Yeah. I bought that house for $80,000. It's in a rough area, rough town, rough county. But I bought it for $80,000, I think it was, or $75,000, and I sold it for $225 over the course of 15 years. So it was a good run up. I mean, even in a rough area, it's still, I got a good number. Now today, I told a year ago, today it's probably worth $3. Like the last year has been nuts there.
Yeah, but still,
again, we regret every property you ever sell. It's like a
yeah. I just had to bring it up. I was trying to find a creative way to do it. But did you did the owner or the new owner, so the person that bought it off you, do they know it's the
they know, but they didn't care. They just wanted the rental. I haven't tried to I thought about turning to Airbnb. Like, to be honest, this sounds really like this is dark, but I was legit worried if it was an Airbnb, people would try to kill themselves in the Airbnb, right? Because like people
actually
a weird legacy thing.
A weird legacy thing. Like they would, because Kurt.
It's actually very true.
It's
very
interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, my worry was that I'd end up with a bigger mess than I want to deal with. I should have at least got a plaque, and then people would have taken pictures. I could have got a plaque and put it in the yard or something. But
still got a story starter, no matter where.
It's a great story starter. It's a great thing to talk about on podcast. So I'll take it.
So cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. All right. Well, last question in the core four is a little bit cooler, and it's more about you and your why. But the question is, what do you want your legacy to be? So what gets you out of bed every morning to do what you do? Like, what do you want to leave this earth with? And I know it's probably a little deep. Share what you're comfortable with, but we always like to ask what people want to leave as their legacy.
Yeah, man. A couple of things. One, like the only thing I really care about is my kids' character. That's it. Like if they have good character, I'm a spiritual guy. I'm a Christian guy. So like, I want them to have that foundation. And if I did nothing else right in my life, but my kids ended up okay, like that's all the legacy I need. And for that reason, I don't plan to give my kids any wealth, at least not much. They might get a property or two. But my theory with that is, with like being in Brandon Turner's household and me training them the way that I'm going to, and I am, if by the time they're like young adults, they're not good enough to build their own wealth, they don't deserve my wealth. And if they are good enough, they don't need my wealth. Right. So it's my job to train them. I'm not relying on schools to train them. Schools are ridiculous and how they train kids and to do like things that actually matter. So I will do my job, and that's the legacy I want. So
that's amazing. I heard actually, it wasn't Aaron McKee who originally said it, but he was a basketball coach, and he said that somebody told him, I don't know if you ever heard this, that like he said, my grandfather walked 10 miles to work, and my father walked 5, and I'm in a Cadillac, and my son's in a Mercedes, and then his son will be in a Lamborghini, and then his son will be walking 10 miles again. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but like this cycle of like
way. Yeah. But I've heard
the fact that you're as wealthy as you are could be, if you don't raise your children right, could be a hindrance to them, right? And you see that oftentimes, like by giving them the wealth, and it's like they don't know how to handle it. So I don't have children. I know neither does REI, but it's like a very interesting thing of like, how do you, if we are going to be wealthier than our parents, right? Which I believe that we will be. How do you keep that so from that your kids don't grow up spoiled, right? And it's the
biggest question in my life. Yeah. It's the biggest thing I'm working through.
Yeah. Well,
I smell a book coming on here, dude.
I know.
That's great stuff though. So we've made it to the last drop. And the last drop is, you've been through all of this in your life, starting from that first rental. If you could go back to maybe your 18-year-old self and look him in the mirror or look him in the eye, whether or not he would listen to you is another story. If you had some advice to tell, 18-year-old Brandon, what would you tell him?
Yeah, I really think a lot of it comes down to like, I have been able to climb as high as my confidence has allowed for. Like when I thought that I was capable of owning a house, I bought a house. And as soon as I thought I was capable of owning 30 rental units, all of a sudden I went and bought 30 rental units. Like, your actions follow your mindset. but your mindset kind of follows your identity. Like who do you think you really are? Like who are you inside? And so it's like my mom, it's like the advice my mom gave me when I was 5 years old, and every mom gives every 5-year-old, is you can do anything you want if you try. And I wish I would have believed that. I think I would have dreamed bigger. And I'm not upset with where I am. If I could tell younger people, it's like, you will grow to the level at which your mindset allows you to grow to, and which your identity will allow. So dream big, because you can do it.
I think that's a great way to end it, man. We thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure just to get to have the conversation. We really, truly appreciate it. I know people are probably already are followers of yours, but let's just say they're interested in, or maybe there's accredited investors that follow us. They want to invest with you. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you or your team? Or maybe you're hiring and somebody wants to apply for a position with you.
Yeah, man, I'll give you 3 spots. First of all, social media, I'm all over there. Beardy Brandon. I'm trying to get better at like LinkedIn and Twitter, but Instagram's my kind of my home base. So Beardy, Beard with a Y, Beardy Brandon. And then I've got a text message newsletter that goes out every week where I just label I talk about my favorite books. I talk about a lot of stuff I'm learning, stuff I can teach, recommendations. I've even talked about random stuff I bought that's cool. Anyway, that is just a spam-free newsletter that goes out by a text message. So that's at beardybrandon.com, beardybrandon.com. And then lastly, if you're interested in my deals that I'm doing, if you want to partner with us and we do the majority of the work, you make the majority of the profits, that is at odcfund.com.
Incredible. Brandon, thank you so much for coming on the show. As Corey mentioned, it was an honor, privilege, and a pleasure. And just, you dropped so much knowledge that I'm glad it went over the hour. I'm like, this week I could talk to you for 5 hours, man. I know. You packed so much knowledge into one episode. So thank you very much. And glad we're all able to connect.
Yeah, man. Me too. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thanks for tuning in this week to the Weekly Juice Podcast. If you liked what you heard, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, and share with friends. The more ratings we get, the more ears we'll get on our show, and in turn, we'll be able to provide you with more high-quality guests. You can also find us on Instagram at Weekly Juice Pod, where we post daily tips and tricks and document our own journey towards financial freedom. Make sure to tune in every Wednesday to get your weekly juice.